Hello, welcome back. So, Chris Paolini has a new book out, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. I am currently reading that as I film this in review copy. Thank you, NetGala. I normally hate NetGala, but they've been very good to me. But I want to talk about the books that's kind of started it all, and that would be, and they're heavy, they're chunksters, The Inheritance Cycle. They're big, aren't they? First things first, I didn't realise these get classed as YA or kids books. Well, YA is children's literature. Anyway, these have always been classed as adult fantasy. They're sold in that section. They're in that section. But let's break them down. Let's talk about them and figure out why I don't have enough room. Please forgive the mess going on. I need to put another coat of paint on that wall. But everything's I'm in the process of redecorating, so there is a bit of chaos going on behind me. If you're wondering where the pillows came from, because a few people have been asking, they are from Poundland. They were 50p each. First things first, the first two of these. Eragon is probably the weakest of the four of the Inheritance Cycle. Eragon, while a good book, it is fantasy by numbers. It's tropey. It borrows elements from the Star Wars storyline and the story beats, but those elements aren't original to Star Wars anyway. They've been done before and done after in varying fantasy and space operas and all of this. And whenever I talk about Star Wars, I can't help but think of crazy Star Wars girl that used to stalk my comments and go, just constructive criticism. So glad she's blocked. What is it with me and crazy people? But this sets everything up. I can't tell you how long I've had this edition. This is not my original edition though. 1230. I have no clue. I can't tell you how old I was when I read Eragon. I can't remember. Dear God. This sets everything up. Farm boy, destiny, dragons, mentor that dies, killed at the hands of the evil empire. It's fun. It was my first real fantasy novel I'd read. I literally went from this to Lord of the Rings, so you can imagine what these mean to me. The second book. This is where he breaks from the typical formula, although some cliches are still there. The story builds, the characters move forward, but he breaks away from the formula of the first book. This is far better written, it's far more interesting in that sense, and as an adult going back, the characters are far more rounded in this book. That's the only way I can say that. Far more rounded. So this is where we get more complicated. These two were originally written as one book, so it's meant to be a trilogy. It grew very long. These have a darker tone, but there's still that optimistic, bright fantasy. I absolutely adore the world he created. It's beautifully researched, beautifully put together. Did I also mention I have this? It got a little damaged years ago, but I have this as well, which is basically maps and letters and explains the races. It's a kid's thing, but it's fun. Someone bought this for me. But yeah, these books were my gateway drug into fantasy. They were my gateway drug into the world of Tolkien and other fantasy novels. And they mean a hell of a lot to me. The first one is probably the weakest. I always think that when I read it, the first one always suffers from being the most predictable. The story beats, the character arcs have been done before. It is Star Wars with dragons, but there's nothing wrong with that because Star Wars is not an original story. It's not. It's Arthurian legend in space. But it's beautifully handled, and actually as the characters move on, it changes. The characters evolve, the story evolves, the world evolves. The ending of the whole thing is so bittersweet, and it's so beautifully put together. There's been a lot of discussion if he is a good writer or a bad writer, and this and that, and why I don't think the first book is the best. I don't think it's terribly written at all. I think the later books are far stronger writing. I think they're far better put together. I also think Chris Paolini's very, very good at telling a story. He's very good at telling these stories with convincing and rich characters. He's very, very good at it, and just a phenomenal series. It's a great first fantasy novel, and whenever I reread them, I always feel like I'm going home. It's like reading Harry Potter or His Dark Materials or something. You're going home. And that's how these feel to me. They take me back to being younger. They take me back to being a teenager in my bedroom, inhaling these books and being so excited and just reading them. Chris Paolini is a great writer, and his new work is even better. It's interesting going back. It's interesting rereading these, but as first-time fantasy, as your gateway drug in. They were mine. Daniel Green has The Wheel of Time. I don't like The Wheel of Time, as you know, and I've got shit for that one. But Eragon was my first fantasy novel that that it was my gateway. I remember reading Lord of the Rings not long after and finding these fantasy novels and looking for these writers and looking for these people. I remember queuing to get the last 2 books. It's interesting going back. It's interesting reliving that moment. I think they're great books. I think they're great books to get people into writing. I am surprised, like I said at the start of the video, that they get put into children's fiction. And I think there's this whole misnomer that if a character is like a teenager, it's automatically YA. I don't think Eragon is children's literature. I don't think kids would understand it. I think depending on your reading level, probably mid-teens is a good age for Eragon. A lot of the themes, especially the themes the later books deal with, they're not YA applicable. They're not children's literature applicable. Eragon exists in this weird bubble. It's a weird space in time. There's a lot of nostalgia. I accept they're probably not the best fantasy novels on the planet, but also I think they're great stories. The story is interesting. The characters are interesting. That's Eragon. I'm so glad they were my first foray into fantasy. So, as always, tell me what you think in the comments below. I will talk to you guys later, and bye.